be looking later on like, okay, what did she say? Perfect. Okay. So we don't have a goofy countdown like Cam and I had.
Whatever needs to happen.
I'm going to put that in the video. Like, literally, I'm going to be like, we don't have a goofy countdown like Cam and I had. Whatever. We're still awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we're square.
One.
Here we go again. Today I'm going to be talking with Brendan from ADHD Essentials. We're going to be talking about life and love and relationships with ADHD and how to make them last and where to meet new people if you haven't met them before. It's a really great episode. I can't wait for you to see it. Thanks a lot.
All right, welcome back to the Black Girl Lost Keys YouTube channel. My name's Renee, and I've got my super friend Brendan with me today. Brendan, say hello.
Hello. How's it going?
Great. I'm so glad you're here. Like, Brendan and I have been buddies forever and ever. Amen. Like, I feel like I've been on his podcast at least, 3 times has it been, Brendan?
3 times, yeah. 2 solid interviews, and then 1 from the conference when I just had people talk for 5 minutes about what their day was like.
So
and 4 on Wednesday.
Yes, because I'm going to be on Wednesday. Oh, my God. Okay, so I'm going to be like the most.
You will be tied with, I think you're tied with Cam, or no? Cam's done 3, so I think you might be the person who's been on the most.
Look, I feel like Cam and I should get into like a battle royale on the most time.
Yeah.
It is funny. I just got finished saying to somebody the other day, like, you know, it's the Black Girl Lost Keys YouTube channel, and I think I've only had 1 black guest so far. There's 3. It's been Anger and then 2 white men. Whatever, it's my channel. There's always a black person on there.
If it helps any, when I was in high school, I was a hip-hop kid in a rock and roll world.
That's it. Like, look, it is what it is.
I have a Naughty by Nature album right there, which is... I'm reading the autobiography of Rakim at the moment.
Are you really?
Yeah.
He's so profound.
It's and it has nothing to do with relationships, but it's good, but also like there's times when it seems like he's trying a little too hard to be profound, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like when you're used to having to be deep, you kind of have to be like, oh, was that deep enough?
Yeah. There's a couple spots where I'm like, that just seems like normal to me. Like that just seems like stuff people know.
Right. Okay, so relationships. From Rakim to relationships. Oh, that should be the title of this one. That would be
sure.
Okay, so.
Don't sweat the technique on relationships.
Yes, exactly. See, this is why we work together. But, okay, so we're talking about relationships, and when it comes to relationships and ADHD, a lot of people want advice, and I think the thing that puts me off of relationship advice with ADHD is so much of it feels like, here's how you put up with your really difficult partner, non-ADHD person. Like, so much of it assumes, one, that there are not ADHD people who are both ADHD and in relationship with each other, which is weird to me because lots of ADHD people are in relationships with each other. And 2, it assumes that the partner is completely miserable and that we are so difficult to put up with. And I feel like we get that message enough. We're really not that difficult to put up with once you understand who we are and why we do the things we do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
one of the things I say in my workshops is I talk about the importance of connection and relationships outside of your romantic relationship, because people with ADHD suck and you need someone to complain about us to. And then I immediately follow that up with, and also people with ADHD need someone to talk to because neurotypical people suck and we need someone to complain about them too.
yes.
Because that's just the way it is.
They're awful and they have no idea how awful they are.
Because everybody's got their thing, right? Like everybody is a little bit broken. Everybody is a little bit abnormal. Everybody is a little bit difficult, whatever the word is that you want to use. Everybody has that stuff about them that you need to be patient with and you need to understand better. and you need some emotional intelligence and empathy and compassion for. Everyone has that. I don't care if you have a disorder or you don't have a disorder, if you're diagnosed with something or not diagnosed with something, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got their stuff. And making a relationship work requires understanding that stuff. It requires being able to understand the person you're in a relationship with in a way that lets you see them for who they are and accept them for who they are. And that doesn't mean there aren't going to be problems. It just means that solving those problems is easier and feels safer because the problem doesn't color the person for the rest of your relationship.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I feel like it just, there's such this, there's so many different places in ADHD land where people feel overwhelming shame. And I feel like this is one of the biggest places that I see the shame cloud hanging over. Like people just feel absolutely awful about the way they interact with their partners. And it makes me really sad.
Yeah. Because it's hard, right? Like I've gone through plenty of stages in my marriage where I'm like, I don't know why my wife is still with me. I don't understand why we're still married. I don't know what to do with that. But we are, like, I'm a success story, right? Like we've been married for 15 going on 16 years. We'll be together for 16 years in August.
Incredible.
And that's just the marriage part. We got together like 2001, somewhere in there. So it's longer than that in reality. It's closer to 20. And we've been through some stuff. Like we've been through my ADHD diagnosis and my undiagnosed ADHD. We've been through like challenges with getting pregnant and infertility. We've been through postpartum depression. We've been through a challenging pregnancy. We've been through unemployment on my end. We've been through the loss of my mom. We've been through a ton of stuff. And we've been through being the parents of identical twins, which is statistically no joke when it comes to divorce either. All of those things, all of those things can lead to divorce, right? And we've been through kids with anxiety and that stuff too, which also ups your likelihood of divorce. We've been through a whole lot of stuff that can be indicative of divorce and certainly increases the likelihood.
Yes.
But we aren't. We managed to figure it out. And I credit a lot of that to my wife and the fact that early on in our relationship, she just pushed communication. And pushed communication and pushed communication. Because I come from an Irish Catholic family that has alcoholism in it.
Yes.
We don't talk about stuff. So I didn't have that. That wasn't my jam. But that was a thing that my wife felt was important. And I got better at it. And then I got really good at it. And now with my family, not my like married to my wife family, but my dad and my sisters and stuff, I'm the guy who says what used to be the quiet parts out loud, right? I'm like, this is the thing we need to deal with. And I credit my wife for that.
That's amazing. You know what? That's the connection. That's why you and I are friends. Because I come from a super Catholic, closed mouth family too. Actually, fun Renee fact. My first name is not Renee, it's Jacinta, which is my mother's confirmation name. I didn't get a first communion though. They really they cheated me. So that's a sore point. I'm agnostic now, but it doesn't matter. I should have gotten one. But yeah, it is that those communication issues in your family of origin definitely bleed over into the way that you interact with the family you create. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad you guys were able to resolve that. That's amazing.
Yeah, because at first it was stuff that wasn't hard to talk about, right? Like it was low stakes stuff. And then we got to the high stakes stuff and we were able to talk about it. And some of that is the trajectory that my life took, where I became a teacher and went into mental health and all that stuff. Those are very communication heavy careers. But knowing that it's safe to talk to my wife about stuff and that we're going to be okay, even if it's hard, even if it's stuff that's really hard to talk about, and even if we battle about what that communication looks like sometimes, it's still a useful perspective on my end to be like, oh, we're better off talking about this than not talking about this. And that, I mean, that colors my coaching, that colors my parent coaching groups that I run. Communication is one of the weeks of the groups, right? Like we just spend a whole week talking about, well, 2 days because we only meet twice a week, but we spend a full 2 hours talking about communication. And we also spend another week talking about connection, which is related to this, right? Because they're the same thing. And as I've sort of played with the organization of the coaching groups, at first it went communication and then connection. And I've since flipped those, and it starts with connection and then we go to communication. Because that feeling of connection between husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, parents and child, friends, like you and your boss, whatever it is, that feeling of connection is what makes the communication feel safer. If the connection isn't there, then the communication doesn't feel safe, regardless of what it's going to be about.
That's the truth.
Yeah. So the stronger the connection, the more we're able to navigate those harder conversations. And the connection stuff really comes from paying attention to who our partner is, paying attention to what they need, paying attention to who we are and what we need, when we need boundaries, when we don't. Because sometimes you need stronger boundaries than other times.
Yeah.
There's days when I'm exhausted and I just don't want to talk to anybody, but I'm still a dad, I'm still a husband, I still own a dog. Usually it's the dog that's really up in my business, and I'm like, go away. But I try to remember that I either need to communicate that I need some time, or I need to just decide that that's less important than my wife talking to me about the big thing that she has going on right now, right? Because sometimes it is. Like my wife's in the middle of a job search. That's okay. That's a thing she can talk about with me. That's allowed, right? Like, or my wife's, I don't know, having an argument with a friend, or my wife is frustrated with her sister or her mom or her dad, like whatever it is, that's an important conversation. And I need to value that.
Yes.
And then weigh the value of that against what my needs are and be able to make a determination around how to handle this next. And then handle it delicately, right? I can't just be like, I don't care about your mom being a jerk. That's not a plan.
No, not if you want to live.
Yeah. I have to respond in a way that is careful. Like I hear you. I understand that you're upset about your mom doing X, Y, and Z. But can we talk about this in like 20 minutes? I need to recover. I'm tired. I'm not focused. I'm really distracted by this other thing, so that we can continue this conversation in a more powerful way and more useful way. And on the other side of that, my wife has to do similar calculations, right? My wife has to be able to say, oh, he seems distracted, right? Sometimes she doesn't pick up on my distractedness, and she comes over and is just like, random thing I want to tell you. And my face is in a computer zoned in, and I'm like, oh, like you just killed it. I lost that hyper focus that I was having. Yeah. And we've had to talk about that, right? Like, cause for her, my wife can be interrupted and go right back into what she's doing. She has that superpower because she is neurotypical, right?
Yes.
I had to walk her through, and more than once, right? Because like I kind of tell her this and teach her this stuff, and then a few years go by and she forgets it, and then we're back to where we were, and I have to have that conversation again, which is fine. But I've had to talk to her a few times about like, look, if I'm doing something, if I'm in that deep work mode, and then you read a headline at me or tell me about a podcast you're listening to, for you, that's like a 2-second experience or a 1-minute experience. For me, I just lost 15 minutes of productivity time.
Period. And people don't understand. They're like, well, why can't you? And it's like, well, if I had the answer to that, I wouldn't have to work.
Yeah. I wouldn't have ADHD, right? Because I have ADHD.
Like, it's like, well, it's just your ADHD. Don't blame your ADHD. And it's like, but I have to blame it because that's what's causing the problem. Like, I'm not saying it absolves me of anything, but you need to know that this is how this affects me, and there's certain things that you just have to accept. Just like we have to accept, like that. I think that's the big thing. Everyone wants to mold their partner into what is most convenient for them, and no one wants to compromise and accept things. And neurotypical or not, there are things that we cannot change about ourselves. We cannot change the fact that we have ADHD. Somebody might not be able to change the fact that, I don't know, that they keep their medicine in the spice cabinet, which is a true story. I can't remember who told it to me. But like, it was a married couple, and they, like, one of them grew up in a house where it was normal to keep your medication in the spice rack, and it just drove the other one nuts. And it's like, look, do you want the medicine in the medicine cabinet, or do you want to be married? Like, there's certain things that are just, that we just have to get past. Do you want to be able to interrupt me, or do you want to be married?
Yeah. And I think that might be part of why we're still married, is I've never had that desire to change people.
Yes.
That's just not how I roll. There's been times in my life when I've been more than willing to change me for someone else, not anymore. I'm willing to like acquiesce, and I'm willing to accommodate and that kind of stuff. That's all fine. But I'm not going to change who I am, because I can't. And I'm not looking to change my wife outside of ways that she wants to change. If my wife wants to, she doesn't want to lose weight because she doesn't have enough weight anyway. But if she wants to like bounce back from this knee injury she had and wants my support in that, I'm going to support her in that. If she wants to improve her conversation skills and wants my help with that, I will help with that within reason. Because even with her, there's times when I'm like, this is something I can do with my eyes closed, but I can't do it for you. Like, my coaching skills are not going to work because you're my wife. So let's find someone else who can navigate this particular challenge around public speaking or whatever.
Isn't that funny how people assume that we can help our relatives? Like, my
Terrible
mom
plan.
And she was like, well, I want to hire you as a coach. And I said, no. And she looked at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, no, I cannot coach you. It's like if I were a doctor, and of course, you know, a coach isn't a medical professional, but same thing. I can't treat you. I can't treat you if I'm a doctor. I can't coach you if I'm a coach. Like, we're too close. I can never get the neutral perspective that you deserve because you're my mother.
Yeah.
Do it. Like, I can't do it. And even if I did, whose mother listens to them, Brendan? Honestly.
and it's not even just that. It's like, I have like some pretty strong powers of insight and understanding of family dynamics and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I turn those off with my friends and my family. Like, unless I need it, unless it's like there's a problem we got to solve and I have to use my powers for good right now. Outside of that, I don't let that passively happen when I'm spending time with friends and colleagues and that kind of stuff, because it's dangerous. I'm going to know too much about you, and that's going to affect our relationship.
Bingo. Because when you have to expose yourself to people, you don't want that to be the person who you interact with on a daily basis. Because you're going to constantly worry about if I'm going to expose you. I'm not, but you're going to feel exposed in certain situations that you might not have otherwise. It's a compromise of that relationship. And of course, you know, other people can do what they want, but that's not something I'm for me, that's not a thing.
Yeah. And also, like, when it comes to relationships, we often know things about our spouse that they don't know about themselves.
Very much so.
Whether or not we have like counseling skills and coaching skills and that kind of stuff,
right.
Regardless of that. And you have to be careful with how you present that information depending on what it is, right? If it's something that's going to challenge their self-perspective in a way that is negative, you got to be really careful about how you share it. And sometimes even when it's positive, you have to be careful with how you share it.
Very true.
And that the impulsivity of ADHD can get in the way of that, right? Like if you're mad and you're arguing and then you're like, well, you're always, and you just drop this bomb.
And blow their mind completely. Like, I didn't know I did that.
Yeah.
Now, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry I said that when I was angry and you weren't ready to hear it, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's a thing that we as ADHD folks have to pay attention to is if you've picked up on something, be careful about how you reveal that, and don't reveal it if you're in an argument. Like that's not ammo.
It's real dangerous. So of course, you know, Brendan's married. I'm not. I used to be. I got a divorce. So I'm out here dating with ADHD, which is very interesting, especially since, you know, rejection sensitive dysphoria comes into play with a lot of people who have ADHD, and I have it. So, you know, getting ghosted is not fun, but especially when you've got this continuous loop playing in your head of course I got rejected. Here's all the things that are wrong with me. Here's all the reasons why I'm going to be single forever and die alone with nothing but my dogs. No, just me.
It's been 20 years on my end, but I get that, right? Like, because that's not so different from other things I've done. Like when I was unemployed and trying to get a job and all that stuff, it's kind of the same thing in some ways.
It is. It's rejection. Any kind of, like, you know, sometimes they don't even call you to tell you you didn't get the job.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you weren't even gonna, like, you get ghosted by me. I think it's incredibly disrespectful not to tell someone why you've disconnected from them.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, I've had, like, there was a relationship that I was in a few years ago that ended, and it was too painful to interact with them, and I ended up having to block them on social media and block them from my phone because it was such a big rejection. It was like the first person I had dated seriously after my divorce, and when the relationship didn't work out, it just completely blew my mind, and I had to create space. So I don't know, like we talk a lot about ghosting and how terrible the people who do it are. I don't know if that was necessarily me ghosting someone, but if that's what ghosting is, then I don't know. I don't know that.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think if a relationship ends, then it ended, and you don't need to talk to that person anymore. You're not doing anything wrong by not talking to them anymore. If the relationship doesn't end and you vanish, to me, that's ghosting.
Exactly. Because the relationship was over, and it's like, okay, I said we could still be friends, but this is actually really like, this is messing with me and my ability to do the things I need to do to be me.
Yeah, I don't think that's ghosting. I think that you're allowed.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think the notion of remaining friends after a relationship has ended is not okay. I don't think it's a good plan. I think it's okay to become friends later. That's allowed. I'm friends with lots of my ex-girlfriends.
Yes.
But in the immediate aftermath,
it doesn't work.
There's a reason you broke up. Like you're allowed to run screaming from each other and get some space. And maybe later on you connect on Facebook or something, and that's okay. But it doesn't have to happen right now. I can remember a girlfriend of mine who she broke up with me, and she was like, but I still want to be friends because you're my best friend. And I looked at her and I said, okay, well, my girlfriend just broke up with me. So if we're best friends, can I talk to you about that? And she was like, didn't know what to do with that, because it's ridiculous to think that we're best friends, but you're breaking up with me. Like, that's not a thing that works.
So, like, what? I'm supposed to be your best friend, and then you get to come over? Like, people do weird stuff like that, where they're like, we're broken up, but, you know, you're my friend, so let me tell you about this great new person that I'm dating. And it's like, why would you?
Yeah, that's hurtful.
Want to hear that? Like, and then it's, oh, well, you're supposed to be my friend. Oh, well, no, but you're supposed to be my friend and not say things to me like that are obviously hurtful. People are strange. and dating is strange. Like I can remember, like I've dated in both the pre and post Tinder era, and I can tell you, friend, you better hang on to that woman for dear life. Don't ever let her go. Ever, if you did, just fix it, no
Yeah.
matter what. Even if you were gonna fix it, no matter what, anyway. But just in case you didn't know, it's very like I'm sure it's not as foreign for people who are accustomed to dating this way, and this is the only way they've done it. It's very strange. People are both too familiar and not familiar enough, if that makes any sense.
Well, Tinder doesn't make sense to me as a strategy for dating because it's commoditizing people and relationships with them and commoditizing sex, really.
Yes.
And that is not a good way to begin a healthy relationship.
At all. It's so strange. And of course, I tried the app at the recommendation of a friend, and I'm like, but isn't that the hookup app? And she's like, well, no, it's not just for hookups. You can meet people to date on there. And I've met some people on there that I went on dates with, but then, I noticed the trend of like, oh, you're really pressuring me for sex. So this is the hookup. Like we need to be a little more clear about what we're looking for in these profiles, because if you were just looking for a hookup, I could have told you to swipe.
I think that you just stick with the old strategies and you can modernize them. But if you want to meet somebody in the 80s, right, you went to a bar, you went to a social club of some sort, you went to a dance club, you did that kind of stuff. And that's where you found people. And that, I think, is the way to do it still, because Tinder's not looking for, are you compatible? Do you have things in common? If you want to find out if you have things in common, connect over social media that is pointed towards an interest that you have.
Yes.
And then you meet other people who have the same interest. And then you start figuring out, is this someone who I could be interested in? And the relationship will develop from there. I think Tinder is like the microwave of relationships.
I agree.
And you can't like bake a turkey in a microwave. It just isn't going to work. You can't bake a cake in a microwave and expect it to work. And relationships are baking. They're just, it takes a while, and that's just the way it is. But the older you get, the more pressure there is to feel like you need to be in a relationship right now and have a meaningful lifelong partner.
Very
And
much.
and oftentimes the people who come in and are acting like they're ready for a lifelong partner are not the best choice, because either they're playing you or they've got enough challenges and feelings of inadequacy going on that unless two people's feelings of inadequacy just happen to line up properly, if they don't line up properly, it's just going to be a nightmare.
Listen, how much time do you have? I can tell you about my first marriage.
And I should add, everybody, when they're looking into a relationship, is going through feelings of inadequacy. There's nothing unique about that. There's nothing bad about that. I don't want anyone watching to feel like I'm being a judgmental, jerky, married dude, because that's not at all what's happening here.
Married guy, it's easy for you to say.
But I'm a guy who's been married for a very long time and still has feelings of inadequacy within his marriage. And like you said, if there's a problem, fix it, right? That's what marriage is. Marriage is nothing but constant maintenance and constantly fixing stuff, whatever that is, and managing your emotions, managing the emotions of your spouse and your kids and all that stuff. And there's people right now who are like, you can't manage your spouse's emotions. It's not your fault if they get upset. Da, 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 da. And those people are wrong, and that's okay.
You have to, if you notice your spouse or like everyone's watching this going, what if I'm not married? If you're not married, the person you're in a long-term relationship with, or the person who you're currently dating, you do. If you're connected to someone, it's like an ecosystem. You're playing off of each other, and there's this push and pull emotionally. So yeah, no, you can't manage their emotions or make them feel a certain way. But if you're being a caring, supportive partner, you're not leaving them to stew in their own pudding, so to speak. You're going to seek them out and look to help preserve the connection.
Yeah. The two most effective, most powerful sources of information on relationships that I've come across are the work of the Gottman Institute and their research and work into bids and turning towards,
Yes.
which is the way that you maintain relationships. And a bid is just any effort to get connection and or attention, right? And I don't like the word attention because it feels frivolous. Connection indicates a deep need, but you don't get connection without first getting attention. So their attention is there too. It's just looking for something deeper. So any effort to get that attention, that connection is called a bid. And it can look like all kinds of things. It can look like your kid laying down in the bed next to you while you're on your computer and them reading a book. That is a bid for connection, right? Yeah. It's one that I had to ignore yesterday because I didn't have any space left. And I just kind of like didn't really reply. I moved my leg over so it pressed up against him. There was some connection there, but that was about all I could do. I had my own sort of overwhelmed brain, I'm exhausted thing happening. And it can be, hey, what do you want for dinner? It can be, are you home? It can be, is now a good time to text? It can be all kinds of different things, both really obvious and really subtle. Yeah. Like how someone stands when they're next to you. If they've got a certain way to stand that indicates they want a hug, hopefully you catch that, you know? Yeah. The more often we respond positively to those bids and turns towards that person, the more likely we are to maintain a relationship with them. And the rate is 85% confirming bids. Wow. That's the percent. Now, it doesn't always have to be a yes, right? It doesn't always have to be like, hey, do you want to go out to dinner? Yes, I do. It can be, so you want to go out to dinner? Yeah, that would be great. I don't really feel like going out to dinner. But I'm not confirming the request. I'm confirming the bid, right? I heard you. I acknowledge that you expressed this need. I can either satisfy that need or can't based on where I am. Yeah. But I'm not always saying yes, but I'm always confirming that I recognize the bid, that's there. I'm not giving you the cold shoulder. I'm not giving you the brush off.
Right.
And I'm also not turning against you, right? They're sort of turning away, which is not responding to the bid. Turning against is, why would you want to go out to dinner? What do you think, I'm made of money? Like that kind of a thing. Yeah. That's turning against. That's even worse than the cold shoulder, maybe depending on who you're interacting with. Both could be bad. But we want to make sure that we're turning towards as often as we possibly can, even if it has to be a no, but we're still acknowledging the request. And that can be hard for folks with rejection sensitivity, right? Because I might feel like, well, if I say no to this, they're going to be rejected. I know how terrible that feels. So if I just pretend that I'm inattentive and didn't notice the bid, then that'll be better. But it won't be.
No, because that
right?
feels like a type of rejection. So
yeah,
you're better off just saying, hey, I'd love to spend time with you, but I can't, or something.
Yeah.
Something is definitely better than not saying anything at all, because lack of confirmation is a rejection on its own. And it's worse, I think, than outright rejection.
Yeah. And with ADHD inattention, you might miss it.
That's the truth. And now there's a thing, because we've been talking about how we need to pay attention to signs and signals or what have you. How do we do that? How, like, when we have so many challenges with our attention as is?
Some of it is managing those challenges, right? Some of it is, I'm gonna get rid of my phone, or I'm gonna, like, I've noticed if I put my phone screen side up, it is more distracting. And if I flip it over and it's screen side down, for me, that's like, nope, don't look at that. It's shut off. You're not doing it. And that's useful. Having it in my pocket sometimes is distracting. I'm like, I feel the weight of it. I know it's there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not. It depends on the situation and those kinds of things. Um, so some of it's that, some of it is paying attention to the environment, right? Like if you're going to go out for a meaningful Valentine's Day romantic type dinner, don't go to Buffalo Wild Wings.
Ah, right.
That's a
Exactly.
horrible plan.
Precisely. So it's like it's not about making sure that you've got your partner under a microscope as much as it is making sure those times when you're able to connect are meaningful within the realm of what you can do attention wise.
Mm-hmm. And talk to them about it. Say, hey, like if I'm missing something, let me know.
Yeah.
And also wonder about what they're doing, right? Like my wife went through a phase after having the kids where she didn't want me touching her. Like it was just not a comfortable thing. And now it's 11 years later, but now like she does want a hug on occasion and that kind of stuff. I'm much more physical than my wife is. I'm much more like physically expressive of my affection than she is. But she doesn't typically actively hug me, but she still wants a hug from me. If I go too long without hugging her, she assumes something was wrong, which
Oh,
isn't necessarily the case. Sometimes I'm just like assuming she doesn't want one, so I'm not hugging her because she hasn't hugged me, but I'm wrong and she wants one. And
the boat is getting missed because
yeah,
everyone's afraid to hug the other one.
right. And we just navigate that, right? And I've learned that like if there's certain ways that she stands near me, that ordinarily she stands near me like that and I just give her a hug, right? But if I'm spacey or too much in my own head or the overly analytical part is when I figured this out. And I'm just not hugging her because I'm doing something else. Now I know, oh, that's like, she knows that's a stimulus response scenario for me. If she does that, I'm going to give her a hug. But if I'm like, but she doesn't want a hug and now I'm stuck in my own head, right? Like, what do I do? And it took me a little while to figure out that that was the stimulus response. And I actually should hug her when she comes over and stands in a certain way.
Yes.
But I've also even had to learn how to hug her and what different kinds of hugs she needs and that kind of stuff. Like if she's upset, she typically wants like the front on hug. That's like more of a comforting hug for her.
Yes.
But she doesn't like the front on hug as much as like a love and affection and celebratory thing. That doesn't feel the same. If she did something good and is sharing good news with me, high fives actually work for my wife really well for like a celebration. That's great. Less so for a hug. So I've had to, was a weird reframe for me. But when I hug her from behind, that's like, that's affection to her. That's like feeling loved as opposed to feeling comforted. And I've only recently figured that one out in like the past 6 months, and we've been together for a very long time. So I'm slow in some ways, but also maybe thinking about things more deeply than other folks. um,
Well,
but
no,
that,
what this is the joy of the ADHD partner. This is the thing that people are so worried about chores and big emotions and things like this. This is the benefit of having an ADHD partner because you are one of the things that we want to focus on.
mm-hmm.
And we'll study you and we'll analyze you and all that overthinking and all that hyper focus you then get to reap the benefit of because who knows this about hugs?
Right.
How would a neurotypical be able to break that down?
I don't think my wife even knows this about herself. I think that she would look at me like I was crazy if I told her.
Right? But think about how loved she would feel if she heard this. Like, my husband is that in tune with what I need. You're not going to get that from neurotypical folks.
Yeah. Right. Because it's part of how we roll. Right. And playing with that rejection sensitivity stuff. Also, there's an inverse of that too, right? Which is like compliments and praise and stuff is super powerful
Yes.
for us because it's the opposite of rejection. So that's in there too. And when I get that compliment or that praise, it's like, it's overwhelming for me. I'm like, oh, okay. Yay.
Like
Um,
I did good, huh?
right. Yeah. And that brings me to that other resource I talked about, which is the 5 love languages.
Yes,
Um, Chapman. I forget the guy's first name. Gary Chapman. Yeah. And he's like he's like a religious guy. It's not a religious book, but he like is like a priest or a deacon or something who has, in the course of his working with families in his church, started to figure out these different love languages. And it's totally like a theory. It's probably backed up by science at this point. I just haven't gone digging deep. But the gist of it is that there's 5 different love languages that people talk in: physical touch, words of encouragement, quality time, acts of service, and gifts. And that if you speak one of those love languages and your partner doesn't, then you might be sharing lots of love with them that they're not picking up on. And vice versa. If your partner is speaking one that you don't understand, they might be sharing a ton of love with you that you're not picking up on.
Yeah.
And that's important to recognize and to know, and to be able to say to your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or husband, wife, whoever it is, even your friends and kids, this is how I recognize that you are caring about me.
Exactly.
And what are you doing to try to tell me that you love me that I'm missing? And then try to meet in the middle somewhere.
It's the truth. That book is, and do they still have the test online where you can just go and click through the questions and find out what your love language is?
Probably.
Apparently there is an apology language now too.
Oh, cool.
Apologies, and I'm like, this is good, because I've I have a relative who, if we were talking about apology languages, their apology language is gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want a damn gift. I want you to apologize to me and acknowledge that you were wrong. That is my apology language. So sometimes we miss the boat with each other because you're not apologizing to me in a way that I can receive. Or if you're not giving me love in a way that I can receive it, then I haven't been loved, whether you've been trying to love me or not. And I think that sometimes for neurotypicals, they get caught up in, this is how a relationship is supposed to be, versus hearing us say, but this is what I need from you. It doesn't matter how a relationship is supposed to be. This is how a relationship needs to be for me. And maybe it's something that you're not used to, but this is what it is to be in relationship with me.
And that's true for us as well, right? Like, everybody brings to a relationship these unwritten rules that we assume are true for everyone, and they're not
at all.
Yeah. It's like you go to Thanksgiving dinner at a friend's house and you're like, you guys eat ham? What is that? Who eats ham? But they do, and that's okay. Or how come there's no mashed potatoes or something, right? Like, it's a different Thanksgiving dinner, and to you, there's only one way. There has to be turkey and peas and carrots and mashed potatoes or whatever.
There should be.
Yeah, sure, but there doesn't have to be, right? Like, there can be other stuff that is another family's Thanksgiving, your unwritten rules that you don't even know about until you go there. And relationships work the same way.
Absolutely. And isn't it weird how many of those kinds of things you don't find out until you're actually firmly in a relationship with someone, where you're just like, what kind of weird shit were you doing in your family of origin? Like, why do you guys do things this way? Like, what's the matter with you? And there's nothing the matter with them. It's just different. And so many of those things, I think there's such small things. They can cause so much strife in a relationship if we're not able to work them out and kind of create new traditions together, or decide which one works best for our family, or decide neither one of them work. Like, it can be such a bone of contention for people. And it's a
Yeah.
shame.
Yeah. I think one of the advantages my wife and I had is that she's Jewish and I was raised Catholic.
Right.
So we had this like different culture thing coming together.
Yes.
So the expectation was that there's going to be rules that I don't know, at least for me, right? There's going to be stuff that I don't know. So I was more open to seeing the unwritten rules that were my unwritten rules and unwritten expectations and being
Right.
aware that they might not be accurate connecting with a woman who is Jewish,
Yes.
and also paying attention to what the expectations are coming from a Jewish family that I need to be aware of and mindful of.
Absolutely. Oh my God, I love that. That's so brilliant. It's almost like if we could all go into relationships being mindful that that's a thing. There are things that we're going to do and that they're going to do that we're not used to, and we should expect it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a profound point.
Yeah, even
Level profound.
thank you. I'll push it a little further then. I was the part-time interim principal of a private Islamic school
Yeah.
in my town. And when I walked in, like as principal, I was like, here's the deal. I got nothing. Like, I don't really understand Islam at all. Like, I can't pretend that I do. There's lots of skills and stuff that I'm bringing to the table, and there's a reason I was picked. But my understanding of Islam is not on that list.
Yeah.
So I'm going to need help with knowing what to do and how to act. And if I screw something up or if I do something that's offensive, please let me know, because I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm just dumb. Like, I'm just ignorant to what's going on. Help me out. And they were very gracious about accepting that and hearing that from me and being willing to help me navigate things appropriately. And like, I was principal through Ramadan, which is a no joke holiday in terms
Yeah.
of like not eating all day and that kind of stuff. And how does that affect students and teachers and all that?
Oh, yeah.
And during that time, I didn't eat either. I just was like, well, then I will also not eat, because
Yes.
then we're all in the same boat, and that's respectful to me. And couldn't you do that in a relationship too? Couldn't you roll into the person you met on Tinder and say, I think you're great. I'm really excited to be going on this first or second date with you. Here's the deal. We have only recently met and I only know so much about you. So if I screw something up, just tell me.
Yes.
I don't know how that would go over on a first date. Like, probably depends on your personality and charisma and stuff, whether you can pull that statement off or not. But it might be a useful thing to try to figure out how to broach in the early stages of a relationship so that you're setting a more realistic expectation.
I love that. I think that'll be so helpful to so many people. Like this, and that's, I think that's the biggest thing. I think that kind of grinds my gears about ADHD relationship advice. It's almost like the assumption is that it is so foreign that it requires its own huge sector of advice. And I think there's like a relationship is still a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like you still need to be considerate of each other. You still need to communicate. You still need to get along. It's not that there, like, yeah, there's some trouble spots, but it's not like we're not learning a whole foreign language here. You're just picking up some additional slang.
And I have called out the areas of this conversation that I think are specific to ADHD. And I've
Yeah.
only said that kind of thing maybe 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Everything
No,
else applies to everybody.
anything wrong. I'm just thinking out loud. Like, it they do. They, like, sometimes, like, we're all in groups and things, and you see like the non-ADHD person come in and they're like, well, what am I supposed to do with them? And it's like, well, we're not foreign animals. Like, we're not, like, you don't need a whole care and feeding guide. Maybe you just need to understand.
But that plays into how are folks presenting themselves on these initial dates and in these relationships, right? Are
Yeah.
you rolling in and going, I have ADHD and that means da 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 da? Because now I'm like, well, you're high maintenance, huh?
Yeah, that's true. You know what? And then there's the other part, which you ever read The ADHD Effect on Marriage?
Yes.
So remember when Melissa was talking about how, you've got your ADHD partner and they're super hyper focused on you, and then all of a sudden they're not anymore, and
Hmm.
there's drop off where you can feel extremely unloved. And I wonder, you know, how do we overcome that? How do we over? It's like, because I guess that's not something that I experience where there's a dramatic drop off in my interest in a person. Like, I don't have that, so I don't know how to tell someone else to combat it.
Some of that I think is normal. It's not weird or unique to ADHD. It's called the infatuation phase of a relationship. It usually lasts, I believe it's 3 to 6 months, but I'm a little rusty on this part, so I might be wrong, but I want to say 3 to 6 months. Part of my brain's like 8 months, but whatever. Um, so there's this sort of short-term initial phase of a relationship where both partners are really tuned into each other and really obsessive with each other, and it works in the brain very, very similarly to how addiction works, for real. I'm not exaggerating anything. Like neurochemistry, it's very similar to addiction.
Yep.
And then eventually your relationship grows out of that phase and beyond that phase and becomes something a little richer and deeper, hopefully. Or you end, one or the other.
Yeah.
And so some of that is just the way it goes. But absolutely, with an ADHD person, if they've been hyper focusing on you for that entire infatuation phase, and then that kind of comes away and they're looking for that depth of dopamine that they were getting from you, and now all of a sudden they're getting it from Fortnite or something, that can feel very rejecting. But if it just kind of diffuses and it's like, now I'm a little more focused on my job, I'm hanging out with my friends again, and yeah, we play Fortnite, but I'm not obsessed with it, that's a little bit different. So I think it might depend on how that shift happens. And if you're worried about navigating it, just now you know what happens, right? So be ready, be mindful of not ignoring your partner when that infatuation phase changes.
Right. And like, there we go again. Like, it's normal relationship stuff. I guess it's just like we need to know the ADHD trouble spots, the emotions. We do have big emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We do feel rejection more sharply. Some of us, obviously, not all of us have rejection sensitive dysphoria.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love about ADHD is how powerful education around ADHD can be.
Yeah.
The more you know about how it works and can stay aware of that and mindful of that, kind of the more you can navigate it effectively. Like there's a really long runway for psychoeducational learning stuff that comes with ADHD that doesn't come with all mental health issues, right? Like if you've got schizophrenia, that runway is short. But with ADHD, it's relatively long. And yeah, we have trouble implementing the stuff we know and applying it. And I'm not going to argue that. But some of that is because we try to apply everything all at once, and don't do that. Like, pick one or two things and just apply that until you can do it reliably, and then move on. Like, watch this video again, pick one or two things that Renee and I have talked about, and only focus on that stuff, because 10% better is all you need. That's it. The compounding interest of 10% over the long haul will make massive changes for you. You're not going to take massive action and totally change things fundamentally, because you're not going to maintain that.
I love that. That's all true, because that is that, like, we see it all the time with coaching clients. They come in and they're like, I want to change this whole laundry list of things. And I'm like, can we pick two things? Maybe three, maybe, depending on what the first two things are. Like, we'll start with those two, get those up in the air, then we can talk about some of the other things. And some of those things need to get off the list completely.
Yeah. Yeah, and that learning stuff is critical. That's why I've got the podcast. It's why I run the parent coaching groups. It's what I do with my one-on-one clients. I can't make anybody do anything. All I can do is give you better information and a new skill or strategy, and hopefully you pull it off.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we all need. We all need the skill. And being in relationship with anyone is a skill. And I think that's part of the problem. The dogs are agreeing with me. But yeah, being in a relationship is a skill that I think maybe we're losing, and we need to recultivate. And that's not just an ADHD problem, that's an around the world problem. We're relating to each other differently. We've got online spaces. We're not meeting up in person as often. It's a completely different way of communicating, and we need to work some of it in and modify where we can in order to maintain lasting relationships.
Yeah, and that's a lot of that's technology, right? Like,
Very much so.
it used to be that we had three places: home, wherever you worked, and some third place, like a restaurant you go to, a bar, a coffee shop, something, right? The gym. Now, a lot of us work from home. So home and job are the same place, which is another challenge.
Yeah.
And then the third place is virtual for a lot of us. The third place is Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or all of them or whatever. And so you're trying to manage all of these different online places, because you can go from one to the other and bounce back and forth really easily. And you have different relationships with different people in Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You interact differently on each of those spaces.
Very much so.
Yeah. And that online stuff is preventing us from having a third place in some cases. Well, I can see all my friends on Facebook. I don't need to go to the coffee shop or the bar or the gym. But yes, you do, because face-to-face interaction is different and better.
True. That's very, very true. Like we need to, that's a podcast episode. That's another video. Like the importance of prioritizing in-person interaction as much as possible.
Yeah. And at a third place is your best choice.
Yeah.
Especially if you're someone who is looking for a relationship. If you've got a coffee shop that you go to regularly, you're going to meet people there. If you go to the gym regularly, you're going to meet people there. Go sign up for classes, like learn how to cook, right? Learn how to, I don't know, knit. Go to those classes, find a hobby that will create a third place for you. Then you're meeting people who have the same interests, and maybe romance will bloom.
I like the way you think. Well, we're wrapped. We're good. We got this thing done. Tell the people who where to find you and what you're doing, what you're up to. You got coaching groups coming up, right?
Yeah, I'm launching online parent coaching groups. So we meet over the internet and chat with a video platform like this one. It actually is this one. Their sign up is happening pretty much now. You can email me at brendan@ADHDessentials.com if that's something that's interesting to you. They take place over 8 weeks, beginning on March 16th and ending May 6th. They happen on Mondays and Wednesdays for an hour. One section runs at noon Eastern Standard Time. The other section runs at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sorry, I'm going to let you do your own time zone transitions there. And registration is happening now. There's going to be a little bit of I'm traveling a lot in the middle of February. So it'll be like, if you wait to email me, I might not get back to you in a timely manner because I just won't be home. And then March too, there'll be a little bit of a time to sign up then. Each week has a theme. So week 1 is parenting as leadership. We don't often think about parenting as leadership, but it is. So let's be intentional about that. Week 2 is systems and structures. ADHD lives and dies by that. Week 3 is connection. Week 4 is communication. I already talked about that a little bit earlier. Week 5 is anxiety. Week 6 is the wall of awful, my model for the emotional impact of ADHD. Week 7 is self-care, because parents of kids with ADHD matter and should take care of themselves. And then week 8 is asking better questions so that our kids say something other than good, fine, and nothing when we ask them about how their day went. And and also because I'm not going to get to everything in 8 weeks. So I've leaving some symbolic space for questions too. A lot of that week is bring me your stuff, like stump your host, stump the coach kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So that's how it works. And it Monday, we meet on Mondays and Wednesdays. Like I said, the Monday stuff is big picture ADHD as it relates to each theme. And then Wednesday we drill down or pick a specific flavor of that theme or something to get a little more out of it. And folks can also find me on the ADHD Essentials podcast that I host. As we talked about earlier, you've been on it 4 times now, or almost 4. Would it be 4 on Wednesday?
4, yep.
So yeah, it's a podcast for parents affected by ADHD, either because they have it, their kids have it, or both. I interview teachers, I interview ADHD parents, and I interview experts on mental health and parenting and ADHD and that kind of stuff. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you look. It wouldn't be the same if I didn't get you on. I'm so glad you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought me on. I'm excited to be part of some of the inaugural episodes of this. It's pretty awesome.
Yes, this is episode 3. Third time's a charm.
That's my basketball number.
That's right. See? We're aligning. Everything's aligned. Perfection. All right, so we're wrapped.
Cool.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Black Girl Lost Keys TV. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And head on over to ADHD Essentials. Listen to the podcast. Sign up for the coaching groups. There's wonderful things going on there. We'll talk soon. Bye.